Most people who want to live more slowly try to slow down. They schedule less. They set phone limits. They protect weekends and guard mornings and build routines designed to create breathing room in a life that keeps filling back up. And it works. For a while. Sometimes for a weekend. Sometimes for a week. Until the complexity of everything they haven't simplified fills the protected space right back in. Because the problem was never the pace. It was the weight producing the pace. And until you address the weight, the accumulated possessions, the obligations, the open loops, the maintenance demands of a life that has grown more complex than it ever needed to be, no amount of slowing down actually sticks. Extreme minimalism was the thing that showed me this. Not as a theory, as a felt, daily, unmistakable shift in what a morning could feel like when enough of the weight had finally been set down. There's a version of slow living that exists in photographs. A ceramic mug, morning light through linen curtains, something baking, a notebook open to a half-finished page that doesn't appear to be a to-do list. That version is beautiful, and it sells a lot of content, but it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain why some people manage to actually live slowly, consistently, in a way that isn't a performance for anyone, while other people try the same aesthetic adjustments and find themselves back inside the same rushed, managing, slightly behind feeling within a few weeks. The photograph never shows you the thing underneath the mug and the curtains that makes the whole scene actually possible. Here's what it runs on. Time that hasn't already been spoken for. Not scheduled free time. Not earned leisure at the end of a full day of maintenance. Not the hour between obligations that you spend recovering from one thing before the next one arrives. Genuinely unspoken for time. Hours that belong to you before anyone or anything else has a prior claim. That kind of time is the actual currency of slow living. And it turns out to be directly, mathematically related to how much you own, how much you maintain, and how many open loops your daily life is trying to manage simultaneously. This is the connection most slow living content never makes explicit. And it's the connection that extreme minimalism makes impossible to ignore. Think about everything you own right now. Not in an abstract way. Actually try to picture it. The furniture that needs occasional attention. The clothes that need washing and storing and replacing when they wear out. The appliances that need maintaining. The subscriptions that need managing. The digital files that need organizing. The objects purchased for activities that happen less often than intended but sit there anyway, representing a small but persistent claim on both space and conscience. Each one of those things charges a fee, not a large fee individually. That's the point. Each single item feels negligible. A few minutes here, a bit of mental bandwidth there. Nothing that would show up as a significant cost if you tried to account for it on any given day. But they compound. And the compounding happens below the level of conscious awareness, which is why most people never make the connection between what they own and why they feel rushed. Henry David Thoreau noticed this in 1845 when he moved into a small cabin on Walden Pond with almost nothing. He wrote that the cost of a thing is the amount of life required to be exchanged for it, not just the purchase price, but the ongoing attention it demanded for as long as you kept it. He wasn't being poetic. He was doing actual arithmetic. And the arithmetic, once you do it honestly, produces a number most people find uncomfortable. A significant portion of your available time and mental energy, more than you'd guess before you start counting, is already allocated. Not to work, not to relationships, not to the things you'd actually choose to spend a slow morning on, but to the maintenance of accumulated complexity that arrived gradually and now simply runs in the background of every day, demanding its portion without announcing itself clearly enough to be questioned. Slow living doesn't fail because people lack discipline. It fails because the maintenance runs on a prior claim to the exact time slow living requires. Here's what actually happens, not what's supposed to happen, not what the content promises will happen when you genuinely reduce. At first, it feels like loss, not dramatic loss, more like the mild discomfort of a familiar weight being absent. You reach for something that isn't there. You notice a gap where something used to occupy a small but regular portion of your attention. That gap feels, initially, like something is missing. And then something unexpected happens in the gap. It fills with something else entirely. Not another possession, not another obligation. Something quieter. The kind of thought that requires uninterrupted space to form properly. The awareness of what's actually happening in your immediate environment. The light changing, the sounds of the specific time of day, the quality of the hour you're in rather than the one you're trying to get to. This is what the Japanese concept of ma points toward. The intentional pause, the space between things that gives the surrounding moments their actual meaning. Not emptiness as absence. Emptiness as the condition that makes presence possible. Extreme minimalism creates ma in time, not just in space. When the maintenance drops, the gaps appear. And the gaps, it turns out, are where slow living actually lives. This is worth being precise about, because it changes what you do when slow living isn't working. Most advice on slow living focuses on the front end. Do less. Commit to fewer things. Protect your mornings. Say no more often. All of that is useful, but it addresses the symptom. The maintenance doesn't care about your intentions. It continues regardless of what you've decided to protect. The inbox needs processing whether or not you've scheduled a slow morning. The objects need tending whether or not you've committed to a calmer pace. The back end, actually reducing what exists to be maintained, is what changes the equation rather than just adjusting how you respond to it. And this is where extreme minimalism earns its place in the slow living conversation. Not as an aesthetic companion, not as a loosely related lifestyle category, as the structural prerequisite, the thing that creates, in practical, daily, measurable terms, the time that slow living requires to actually function. Here's a concrete way to feel this difference. Two people decide they want slower mornings. The first person sets their alarm 30 minutes later, puts their phone in another room, and commits to a quiet cup of coffee before checking anything. The second person, in addition to those adjustments, has spent the previous 6 months systematically reducing what their life requires to run. Fewer possessions, simpler finances, fewer subscriptions, memberships, and obligations maintained out of habit rather than genuine choice. Both people wake up at the same time with the same intention. The first person spends the quiet coffee half aware of everything waiting. The list is running beneath the surface. The morning is quieter, but the mind is not, because the mind knows what the day contains. The second person sits inside something genuinely different. Not just a quieter schedule, a quieter relationship with the day itself, because the day contains less that requires managing before it can be lived. That difference between a slower schedule and an actually simpler life is what extreme minimalism produces that slow living intentions alone cannot. Here's the realization that tends to arrive somewhere in the middle of genuine simplification, usually when you're not expecting it. Slow living isn't something you choose once. It's something you rebuild the conditions for repeatedly through a series of smaller choices that most people never connect to the larger goal. Every time you decline to own something that would require ongoing maintenance. Every time you let a subscription lapse rather than renewing it out of inertia. Every time you simplify a financial structure, a social obligation, or a daily routine that had become more complex than it needed to be. Each of those small choices is a vote for the morning you actually want. Not a dramatic vote. Not one that announces itself as meaningful in the moment. Just a quiet, practical, cumulative reduction in the prior claims on your time, until the time that remains is genuinely, structurally yours rather than just theoretically protected. This is the reason extreme minimalism shows you something about slow living that slow living content alone rarely reaches. Slow living describes a destination. Extreme minimalism provides the mechanism for actually getting there. And the mechanism isn't discipline, which is what most people assume when they hear the word minimalism. It isn't willpower or self-denial or any form of forcing yourself away from things you want. It's a gradual recalibration of what you actually want. Because here's what happens, reliably, to almost everyone who reduces seriously and sustains it long enough. The desire for the things that were producing the weight quietly diminishes. Not because you talked yourself out of wanting them, but because you discovered, in the space their absence created, something that the things were never providing and the space was. The Japanese slow living tradition has a word for this quality, shizukiza, quietness, not the absence of sound, but the presence of a mind that isn't generating its own noise to fill the silence. Shizukiza doesn't arrive through discipline. It arrives through reduction sustained long enough that the mind stops expecting stimulation and starts being genuinely comfortable in its own company. That's the slow living that doesn't need protecting, that doesn't require defending against the week's complexity, that simply exists as the default state of a life that has been made genuinely simple rather than just scheduled more carefully. So here's what slow living actually requires, stated as plainly as possible. Not a better morning routine, not more discipline or more boundaries or more carefully protected time. Less weight. Specifically, less of the accumulated, compounding, below-the-surface maintenance load that a complex life generates whether or not you've decided to slow down. Extreme minimalism addresses the weight. And when the weight drops below a certain threshold, different for every person, but real and recognizable when you reach it, the morning you were always trying to engineer simply appears. Not because you arranged for it, because you finally stopped maintaining the things that were preventing it. Thoreau went to Walden because he wanted to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see what it had to teach. He wasn't escaping. He was removing enough that what remained could finally be clearly seen. Most people don't need a cabin in the woods. They need the same principle applied to whatever their version of accumulated complexity looks like. The slow morning is not a luxury reserved for people with simpler lives. It's available to anyone willing to make their life simpler in the specific ways that actually matter. One maintained object less. One prior claim on your time, quietly released. One open loop, finally closed rather than managed indefinitely. Not all at once, but consistently enough, over enough time, that the weight eventually lifts. And the morning arrives that you stop trying to protect and started simply having. If this landed somewhere real for you, if it names something about why slow living has felt harder to reach than it should, say so in the comments. And tell me this, what's one thing in your current life that's running on maintenance you never consciously agreed to keep paying? You don't have to remove it today, but naming it is usually where the weight starts to become optional.